I will take one for the team. Okay. Mayor Bill de Blasio signed off on a 32% pay raise for city council members today, bringing their salaries up to almost $150,000. This was one of 5 pieces of legislation approved by the mayor this morning. The other measures include reducing fees for seniors at parks and recreation centers. Okay.
Are we good?
I'll get back at you.
Are we good, though?
You're listening to Uptown Radio. It's February 19th. I'm Jeffy Bernard.
And I'm Isabella Kulkarni. In Upper Manhattan, inclusive churches are reaching out to LGBT parishioners.
I was told that I was a mistake, and I'm embarrassing God.
Spring training is beginning for Major League Baseball, but domestic violence allegations against a new Yankees pitcher have fans divided.
These men are supposed to be in position as role models. I don't think it really matters if they're an athlete or not. They should still be held accountable.
A new plan from Mayor Bill de Blasio promises affordable housing, but not everyone's on board.
They need to house the people that need to be housed. Why don't they start with trying to find housing for the people who live in the shelters?
And while many New Yorkers have been known to doze off on the train, can you really get quality sleep on the subway?
Sometimes the rocking of the train reminds me how you see like babies getting rocked by their parents.
All that and more on Uptown Radio. But first, the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. It is a solemn day at the U.S. Supreme Court where the late Justice Antonin Scalia's body lies in repose. A short time ago, President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama paid their final respects. Since this morning, members of the public, including Calvin Bernard, have also been allowed to walk past Scalia's casket.
I just wanted to be here because I think he did a tremendous job while he was alive.
In accordance with Supreme Court tradition, Scalia's former law clerks are taking turns standing vigil and will continue to do so until his casket is transferred to his funeral service in the morning. A deep loss for the literary world today. Harper Lee, whose first published novel, To Kill a Mockingbird, earned a Pulitzer Prize and inspired an Oscar-winning film, has died. NPR's Debbie Elliott reports Lee's family says she passed away early this morning in her hometown of Monroeville, Alabama.
Her family says Harper Lee passed away in her sleep. She was 89 years old. Lee's 1960 classic, To Kill a Mockingbird, is a tale of the Jim Crow South seen through the eyes of a young girl, Scout. The media-shy writer had been living in an assisted living facility in Monroeville since suffering a stroke in 2007. Last year, she surprised literary circles circles by publishing an earlier novel, Go Set a Watchman. Lee's nephew, Hank Connor, said in a statement, "America and the world knew Harper Lee as one of the last century's most beloved authors. We knew her as a loving member of our family and a devoted friend." In recent years, Lee had been embroiled in legal disputes with her hometown museum over trademark issues. Debbie Elliott, NPR News.
A man held in solitary confinement in Louisiana for nearly 40 years has been released from prison. Eileen Fleming of member station WWNO reports Albert Woodfox is the last of the so-called Angola 3 inmates.
Albert Woodfox was released after pleading no contest to manslaughter for the 1972 stabbing death of a prison guard. Woodfox has long maintained his innocence, but he said in a statement released by his attorney that he entered the plea because of his age, 69, and poor health. He and 2 other inmates were active in the Black Panthers while held in the Louisiana prison at Angola. Supporters claim the 3 were convicted in retaliation for their political activism while in custody. He was set for a 3rd trial in the murder case when he was released. For NPR News, I'm Eileen Fleming in New Orleans.
The U.S. military has carried out an airstrike in Libya targeting a suspected ISIS training camp near Sabratha. The defense official says that a senior Tunisian operative, Noureddin Chouchan, was likely among those killed in the operation. Tunisian authorities named Chouchan a suspect in a deadly attack on the Bardo Museum in Tunis last March. Before the close, Dow was down 21 points. This is NPR News.
From New York, I'm Susie Shea. Mayor Bill de Blasio signed off on a 32% pay raise for city council members today, bringing the salaries up to almost $150,000. This was one of 5 pieces of legislation approved by the mayor this morning. The other measures included reducing fees for seniors at parks and recreation centers and requiring elected officials to post their financial disclosure forms online. The NYPD has joined the federal government in criticizing Apple's handling of encrypted phones in the San Bernardino case. Police Commissioner Bill Bratton says the company's encryption technology routinely hinders criminal investigations. There are currently 175 devices in police custody that investigators can't access because of these security measures. Bratton says this is bad business for Apple.
There is significant corporate irresponsibility in understanding the impact of, for commercial interests, the negative impact on their customers in terms of traditional crime or potential for terrorist acts.
But the Justice Department today said it's all about business, calling the company's refusal to unlock phones a mere marketing strategy. And one of the most prominent businessmen in the United States, Donald Trump, called for an Apple boycott this afternoon. Tech companies such as Google and Yahoo have voiced their support for Apple. Governor Andrew Cuomo announced today that 900 solar projects are underway in New York as part of the state's Solar Rise campaigns. These initiatives encourage businesses to make deals with residents that help lower costs for solar projects. Cuomo said 30 more are set to begin this spring. A New Jersey man who forged the signature of a New York Mets executive pleaded guilty this week to wire fraud. Michael Conway collected more than $3 million by forging contracts under the name of Jeff Wilpon, the New York Mets chief operating officer. Authorities say Conway faces up to 20 years in prison. And New Yorkers will need to think twice about taking the 1 train this weekend. No trains on that line will be running until 5 a.m. Monday. This is Susie Shea, Columbia Radio News.
This is Uptown Radio. I'm Jeffy Bernard.
And I'm Isabella Kulkarni.
One of Mayor Bill de Blasio's biggest platforms has been pushing for more affordable housing, and a keystone proposal is going up for a vote soon in the City Council. The Mandatory Inclusion Housing Plan, or MIH, requires developers to set aside a quarter of apartments in new developments for lower-income residents. But housing activists, many who supported de Blasio, are torn over what's considered affordable, and that could be a problem for mayor's re-election campaign. Stephen Basaha reports.
Bernice Swinton greets arrivals with a hug as they enter St. Paul's Chapel. Swinton works with the group Faith in New York. It's Thursday morning, and they're holding a teach-in just a few blocks from City Hall. The subject, MIH, Mayor Bill de Blasio's Mandatory Inclusionary Housing Plan. Faith in New York supports affordable housing, but they're far from satisfied with what's being proposed.
Mayor de Blasio came in and he was shaking his head in agreement. But when the shovel started hitting the dirt, it was a completely different turnaround coming from him.
MIH mandates that any new building in New York City must reserve 25% of its units for affordable housing. Most activists agree that's great, but they disagree on the definition of affordable. Under the mayor's plan, 2-bedroom apartments will be reserved for families making up to about $47,000 a year. Swinton says that's too high for her and her neighbors in Long Island City.
I don't think that it works very well with my income or the income of others who live in the neighborhood.
The debate over the plan reached a boiling point last week when the city council held 2 days of hearings packed with public testimony.
We'll ask everybody to be respectful.
The council tried to stagger speakers between those against the housing plan, like Make the Road New York,
We cannot support MIH as written.
and those who were for it, like Regional Plan Association.
I'm here to testify in support of mandatory inclusionary zoning.
But it wasn't long before the council ran out of voices in support of MIH. At one point, Councilman David Greenfield said affordable housing advocates were not giving the administration enough credit.
And 12 years ago, you would have thrown a ticker tape parade for whomever the mayor was at that time.
But this year, there are no parades. Instead, there are marches and protests. Steve Cohen is a professor at Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs.
There's very little question that some of the advocates that were behind him are disenchanted with him. That's almost inevitable if you're a governing mayor.
With a re-election campaign on the not-too-distant horizon, keeping his winning coalition intact is certainly on de Blasio's mind. But Cohen says some of that opposition is inevitable.
If you're an activist group, how do you get members and resources if you're not opposing the established order? To some degree, the community group's business is to oppose whoever's in power.
Back at St. Paul's, Faith in New York is preparing to march to City Hall. There, at the steps of the building, they'll hold a prayer vigil. Only Love Alston is the group's executive director and part of the mayor's Clergy Advisory Council. She insists that there isn't any rift between Faith in New York and the mayor, and they still manage to work together on other issues.
If he's doing well on immigration, then we'll work together on that. If he's doing well on criminal justice, we'll work together about that. It's not about a personal relationship.
Meanwhile, the council is reviewing the mayor's plan. And there may still be changes, but how those changes shift voter thinking for next year's election remains to be seen. Stephen Bisaha, Columbia Radio News.
And now, a look at how the mayor's housing proposal will affect a specific Brooklyn neighborhood, East New York. Some neighborhood residents say that under the mayor's plan, new housing would be anything but affordable. Tyler Pratt reports from Brooklyn.
Chris Banks is driving through East New York on a gray winter day.
This is my block. This is a block I grew up on. It's my grandmother's house. I live in the apartment over there.
Banks was born and raised here. He founded East New York United Concerned Citizens over a decade ago. Originally, it was meant to work with elderly and youth, but now it fights gentrification.
We want East New York to be bigger. We want it to be great. We want it to be brighter. And the people in the community should determine what goes on, what comes in. And it seems like that's being eroded under the mayor's plan.
But the mayor says his plan will create opportunities for residents who are currently priced out.
It will create affordability in the midst of what has been the greatest affordability crisis the city has ever experienced. It will be a central pillar in the battle against inequality.
And a battle is being waged. The majority of borough presidents and community boards around the city have opposed key rezoning portions of his plan now at City Council. Why? It all depends on how you define housing affordability. Currently, affordability is calculated by the average median income from across all 5 boroughs, not the specific neighborhoods where new housing would be built. Here's New York public advocate Letitia James at a Brooklyn town hall this week.
The plan is not affordable. His plan clearly does not reach low-income families in the city of New York.
Housing New York would require developers to set aside some units for affordable housing when they build, with incentives to create more senior housing and retail space. The mayor says this would improve neighborhoods and boost economies, but residents have doubts. Chris Banks stopped by Eleanor Pinckney's house. She's the president of the East New York Homeowners Association.
We're concerned with increasing property values, taxes going up, ridership on public transportation, parking issues, school issues, police issues.
Pinckney says East New York houses 11 of the borough's homeless shelters, so her community's resources are already worn thin.
They need to house the people that need to be housed. Why don't they start with trying to find housing for the people who live in the shelters? They've got people who've been living there for years, families that can't find housing.
Sitting around Eleanor Pinckney's dining room table, Chris Banks says he wants good things for his community, but he worries about the implications of the mayor's plan.
To me, it conveys the message that nothing exists in East New York and that they're coming into our community to build it up. A year or two ago, they talked about East New York as being a new frontier, which I found to be very offensive. When I hear frontiers, it reminds me of, when they were trying to quote unquote settle the West. And there was nothing out there but Native Indians who were savages.
The mayor's office did not respond to requests for comment, but Banks and Pinckney say they have a meeting with de Blasio this week to discuss his plan. Still, they're concerned it could be too little, too late. Tyler Pratt, Columbia Radio News.
New York City's Economic Development Corporation and CUNY just announced a new visa program that will bring foreign entrepreneurs to New York. As part of the plan, 80 businessmen and women would mentor students and professors at CUNY. In exchange, they would receive an H-1B visa, one kind that allows foreign entrepreneurs to live and work in the United States. CUNY says the program could help create 700 jobs in the next 3 years. I spoke with Peter Assad, a lawyer with Immigration Solutions Group. According to Assad, even someone like South African-born PayPal co-founder Elon Musk could have benefited from this visa program.
Because there's a cap on the number of H-1Bs, meaning there's a limit each year, and that leaves individuals with a 1 in 4 chance of actually getting an H-1B, and it is a random lottery selection process. So really, in Elon Musk today, we may not have the benefit of his genius or his innovation. So what would an Elon Musk do today? He would go to New York City and he would work with Into NYC, and he would essentially be invited by Into NYC to partner with CUNY universities to collaborate.
So this would be entrepreneurs from other countries, correct?
They would be foreign entrepreneurs, so they might be an individual from another country who comes in, or perhaps they're graduates from U.S. universities, and it could be a graduate from the same university that they're going to be housed at while they start their company.
So how big is the need for immigrant entrepreneurs?
Well, the need for the United States for immigrant entrepreneurs are very, very significant. So what does Google's Sergey Brin, eBay's Pierre Omidyar, and Tesla's Motors' Elon Musk all have in common? Well, each of these serial entrepreneurs founded companies that have market caps in the tens or hundreds of billions of dollars. And they are employing tens of thousands of workers. And they were born outside of the U.S. So our best and brightest don't necessarily come inside the U.S. They also come from outside the U.S.
How would this program determine when there's enough people coming in, or is it do you still have a goal year round that you have, or is it just anyone can apply? What is it?
Sure. Well, first of all, as far as the cap, that's something in the law, and again, universities, anyone who directly contributes to universities are exempt from the cap. So there's no limit in terms of how many legally can be brought in. In terms of the program itself, it's going to be a very selective program. So we are looking at 7 universities. So that's a pretty large scale, which each university could take on anywhere from 5 to 12 perhaps. And so we're looking at anywhere from 35 to 80 entrepreneurs. And we're looking at being very selective. So we're not going to be looking at sheer numbers, but looking at the quality and of the entrepreneurs and what they may be able to offer.
As far as this program, if it's successful, do you think it will be implemented in other major cities in the United States?
We hope so. We hope so. We would like other major cities to implement it. We know Massachusetts and Colorado already have programs, but it's not citywide. It's not a municipal run program. So we are hoping that there will be larger scale programs that will be innovation ecosystems, which will really provide a means of obtaining the best and brightest and most viable startups, which again, when you have a city like New York, running this and managing this and seeking out through its various networks and channels those who could bring contributions and job growth to New York City and therefore contribute not only to New York City but to the United States, we really do hope that other cities will follow the lead.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Peter is a lawyer for Immigration Solutions Group, a law firm in Washington that provided counsel on this new initiative. After over 2 years of planning and promotion, the first 12 Link NYC Wi-Fi kiosks were rolled out by Mayor Bill de Blasio yesterday. The stations have an Android tablet where you can browse the web, make 311 and free domestic calls. But how secure is this network, and what does that mean for our privacy? Amina Lovell has the story.
Easy, fast, and accessible, Link NYC kiosks are the first of their kind in the city. So far, they have been met with excitement.
Yeah, I think they're awesome. I think they're really awesome.
And a little fear.
I think we're a city or a nation or a world of robots.
In partnership with CityBridge and at a cost of $300 million, Link NYC hopes to have 500 kiosks operative by July and eventually 7,500 across all 5 boroughs. Link NYC is perfect for the average 54.4 million tourists who come to New York every year. Tourists like Line Milkbust, visiting from Norway. Testing the promised 1 gigabyte per minute speed, she's impressed.
Looks like it's pretty good. Yeah, I just logged onto Facebook now. I was going to try to FaceTime my mum because she's overseas and looking after my children while I'm here. So I thought I'd see if that works.
Any concerns about privacy?
Not really. I mean, I wouldn't do anything that I would worry about people seeing anyway. So, yeah. If I was going to do anything sus, I'd do it at home, I suppose.
According to Mark Wergler, the senior security researcher at technology company Immunity Inc., the system is very robust, but there's no such thing as perfect security.
It's inevitable that attackers will try to penetrate this thing, that once they're on the network, then all of that wireless encryption goes away.
So while these kiosks are convenient and free, there will always be risks.
You should always be in the frame of mind that it is a malicious network, and in order to protect yourself in a hostile environment on a hostile wireless network, you want to use a VPN.
That is a virtual private network. That's a level of encryption most people don't use. And for now, New Yorkers seem too excited by the free Wi-Fi to worry about their privacy.
There should be a hotspot everywhere.
And that's precisely the goal of Link NYC. Amina Lovell, Columbia Radio News.
1 in 3 New Yorkers haven't had their teeth checked in the past year, according to city data. Yet going to the dentist regularly is the best way to make sure you don't develop oral diseases. Increasing access to dental care is one of the challenges that 700 students are tackling tonight at the NYU Global Hackathon. Osa Secker has the story.
Roger Garcia has just come out from the NYU Dental Clinic. He has what's called periodontitis.
It's something that causes the bone in my teeth and my gums to deteriorate.
Before he started getting treatment, it had been 2 years since he went to the dentist. The reason? He didn't have insurance, so he couldn't afford it. And that's not unusual. In 2012, around 40% of Americans didn't have dental insurance.
I did not know where to go, or because I was trying to get treatment for it, but it was expensive, so it was really difficult for me to be able to.
Expensive or not, our teeth are important, and the students at the NYU Hackathon are going to try and come up with technological solutions to improve dental care.
Patients to come in that can be treated.
Vanessa Bikazi is a fourth-year dental student and the volunteer coordinator at tonight's hackathon. The 700 students that have registered will be working in 4 different tracks: education, accessibility, sustainability, and, for the first time this year, the dental track. The participants will be divided into teams of 5, and they all have different expertise. The idea is to create prototypes, like an app, that would help people gain better access to dental care.
But I'm thinking if the problem is that you feel like you can't afford to go to the dentist, an application is not going to help you with that.
An application won't help you, but I think we're looking more on the preventative aspect of things.
She says patients tend to wait too long before they go see a dentist. But we all know that when problems become worse, they also become more expensive to fix. But money is not the only reason why people don't go. Stephanie Russell is a professor at NYU Dental School. She says dentists typically work 9 to 5, and for those who work, it can be hard to get time off to go. There's also a lack of education.
So, for example, women who are pregnant are at higher risk for certain diseases like periodontal disease, bleeding gums, and I think maybe a lot of women don't realize this. So getting that kind of very specific, individualized information out there, I think, could be very useful.
The NYU students don't start working on prototypes until 6 tonight. In the meantime, it might be a good idea to try some old school technology. Brush, rinse, and floss. Åsa Secker, Columbia Radio News.
The NYPD says crime on the subways is up almost 30% this year compared to last. That number includes slashings, sexual assaults, and robberies. And half of those crimes happen to sleeping passengers. That has cops asking riders to stay awake on the subway and, in some cases, threatening to wake them up.
So if police get serious about stopping subway snoozing, will New Yorkers lose a real source of restful sleep? Daniel Rostas reports.
It's almost a New York City rite of passage, sleeping on the subway. If you've never done it yourself, chances are you've seen someone dozing off during their commute. Nathan Elga was taking the C train to TA a class at Baruch College. He says he got fined once for taking up too many seats while sleeping, and he still loves napping on the train.
Sometimes the rocking of the train reminds me how you see like babies getting rocked by their parents or maybe in the womb or something like that, but it's something inherently relaxing.
Passing out somewhere public like a subway car seems crazy to some, like Rita Jones, who was getting off the B train at Columbus Circle with a few suitcases.
I would never fall asleep on a subway. It's too dangerous. Anything could happen.
Exactly what police say. NYPD Commissioner Bill Bratton said earlier this month that because of high levels of crime on the subway, cops would wake up all sleeping passengers. Transit Police Chief Joseph Fox later backed down on that, saying police may still wake you up if it's late at night, or you leave your cell phone visible. But if the subway is so dangerous, never mind loud, can you really fall asleep deeply enough that you get any real rest? Dr. Carl Bazil is the director of the Sleep and Epilepsy Division at New York Presbyterian Hospital. He did a one-man study about the science of subway snoozing.
We got a volunteer from the department who allowed us to hook him up to some monitors and to put him on the A train. He's all wrapped up with all his electronics and stuff. Of course, it being New York, nobody even gave him a second look.
Dr. Bazil says what happened next surprised him.
I thought the result would be nobody really fell asleep. I mean, you might doze off, very lightest stages of sleep. Well, he did. He actually went into stage 2 sleep, which is, not the deepest, but deep enough where you wouldn't be expected to wake up really easily.
And stage 2 sleep is deep enough to give you a bit of a boost without leaving you feeling groggy. As for the safety aspect, don't worry. Bazil says you will wake up if a violent crime is happening. That's why we get woken up by loud noises, like alarm clocks. But
if it's a good pickpocket, that can happen when you're awake, so it really depends on what's going on.
So police are asking New Yorkers to give up on some verifiably good sleep for the sake of being a little more on guard. But not everyone dozing on the subway is squeezing in a quick power nap. Alexander Horwitz is the chief of staff at the Doe Fund, a nonprofit that helps the homeless transition into housing and employment. Horwitz says he thinks police should reconsider waking up some riders, the homeless. He says the shelter system is overcrowded, and sometimes the homeless sleep on the train because they have nowhere else to go.
And they will be on the subways because the subways are warm, they are clean, they are well lit, and they are safe. And they are much safer than being on the streets. And so it's a perfectly reasonable thing for a person to do.
Whether or not they'll wake everyone up, the NYPD says it's pulling transit cops from desk jobs and putting more on platforms and trains, so riders can rest easy. For now, at least. Daniel Rostas, Columbia Radio News.
We all love it when someone gives us a compliment, but we can't expect to receive them if we never offer them up ourselves. Commentator Isabella Kulkarni tells us why we should pay it forward.
This past year, I went on family vacation to Miami with my unconventional family, my 4 siblings aged 5 through 15, my dad, and his girlfriend Celia. As we sat around the dinner table on New Year's Eve, we all seemed to be sipping on the haterade. It was humid and we were sticking to our seat cushions. Felix and Sebastian were upset that we weren't in the inside in the air conditioning. Oscar was mad he lost to Felix at bowling. And Catherine was being a preteen. Everyone was avoiding eye contact, looking sullenly at the tablecloth, watching their forks make grooves in the fabric. Generally speaking, I feel equal parts adoration and vexation for my family. But that night, all we could seem to do was be decidedly mean to each other. We've all witnessed our family's ability to hit us where it hurts, to dig into each other's insecurities. I'd had it. I realized that if I didn't have something nice to say about my family, the people I'm supposed to know best, how could they expect the rest of the world to think highly of them? I turned to my left and told my brother Sebastian I admired how calm and polite he was, what a good role model for his younger siblings he'd grown into. And then I circled the table, telling each person a reason I loved them. The compliments caught, like a lit fuse, and soon everyone was offering up qualities they admired about each other. I began to wonder, if compliments can make our spirits lift, why are we stingy with something that gives so much pleasure? Compliments feel good because they cause your brain to release feel-good chemicals, dopamine, a neurotransmitter you've probably heard about in reference to love. The more dopamine that's running through our brains, the better we feel. But as a society, while we value success, we undervalue praise. Instead, the popular view seems to be that constructive criticism is more character building than well-wishing. But our brain science suggests praise is an incentive, like money, so shouldn't we start treating it that way? Like a cranial investment for the collective good. Silicon Valley is onto compliments. There's been a proliferation of internet apps and platforms devoted to random acts of kindness. Apps like Kinder or Brighten allow you to send compliments, and some special Facebook groups allow you to post anonymous compliments by sending a message and having a moderator repost the compliment publicly. But we shouldn't have to turn to the internet to dole out compliments surreptitiously like there's some kind of sinful activity. Praise isn't a vice like eating chocolate or binge-watching Friday Night Lights. That night at the table, I watched my 5-year-old brother Felix stand up and explain why he loves Mummy, how much he loves her, because he said, she's a really, really good mummy. That's the praise that heats up your insides and makes faces go from sullen to animated. Praise is an untapped resource. It accrues interest not by sitting in the reserve banks of our well-wishing mind. Instead, it gains power when we give it away to the people we want to motivate. I know I'm going to start more family dinners with the clink of glasses full of praise.
Isabella Kulkarni is based in New York and happy to receive compliments.
You're listening to Uptown Radio.
There's more to come. Stay with us.
You're listening to Uptown Radio. I'm Isabella Kulkarni.
And I'm Jeffy Bernard.
On the second half of our show, we have stories for you about the Yankees, transgender women, midlife crises, and Harper Lee.
These stories and more coming up. But first, these headlines.
Harper Lee, the author of the novel To Kill a Mockingbird, died today in her hometown of Monroeville, Alabama at the age of 89. The novel, which deals with racial injustice in a small town of Alabama, is one of the most important works of the American literature. Lee won the 1961 Pulitzer Prize for her work, lived the rest of her life avoiding the limelight, and did not publish another novel until last year. Tyler Pratt has the story.
Harper Lee said she never expected any kind of success with her acclaimed novel, To Kill a Mockingbird, but fame found her anyway. The book, loosely based on her childhood growing up in the Deep South, sold more than 40 million copies and became required reading for students across the country. She became a literary celebrity, but hated the attention, so much that she largely withdrew from the public eye. She assisted Truman Capote in reporting his pivotal work In Cold Blood, but never published again until last year's Go Set a Watchman, a Mockingbird sequel released amid much controversy. A stage version of Mockingbird is headed to Broadway in 2017. Tyler Pratt, Columbia Radio News.
Harper Lee's family said that as she requested, a small private funeral service will be held. Hundreds of mourners are paying respects to the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, whose body is lying in repose today at the Supreme Court.
He was natural. He was himself all the time. There was nothing phony about him. He was just straightforward, and what he said yes was yes, what he said no was no. He was very straightforward. I like that about him.
President Obama was criticized for not attending Scalia's funeral mass, which will be held tomorrow. Vice President Biden is expected to be there. The Obama administration announced today it will launch My Brother's Keeper program in 10 cities, including New York. The program connects more than 1 million chronically truant young people with mentors and is designed to keep those students from skipping school. My Brother's Keeper will start in school districts with low incomes and high absenteeism levels. Officials say more than 7 million children miss a month or more of school each year, which puts them in risk of dropping out. The Vatican tried to clarify the Pope's comment that the Republican candidate Donald Trump's plan to build a wall with Mexico to halt immigration into America was not Christian. Spokesman Father Federico Lombardi said in no way was that a personal attack. He said that the Pope believed migrants should be helped and not shut out. Pope Francis returned home yesterday after a successful trip to Cuba and Mexico. The presidential campaign continues tomorrow, with voters going to the polls in South Carolina primary and a Nevada caucus. Polls in South Carolina's GOP primary show real estate developer and reality TV star Donald Trump leading his Republican rivals by 5 points, while the Democratic race between former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders is tightening in both states. Laura Gamba, Columbia Radio News.
This is Uptown Radio. I'm Isabella Kulkarni.
And I'm Jeffy Bernard. It's only February, but the boys of summer are heading back to work. That's right. It's spring training for Major League Baseball. Both New York teams are back to camp with pitchers and catchers going through their first official workouts today. And probably the biggest news is this. The Yankees' pitching rotation got an upgrade over the winter. As Elizabeth Brockway reports, not everyone is happy about it.
The New York Yankees made headlines in late December when they traded for all-star closer Aroldis Chapman, one of the hardest-throwing pitchers in the league. His fastball routinely tops 100 miles an hour. So for him to be a Yankee, that's great news, right? For fans like 26-year-old Oscar Valeriano, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm excited because that boosts our bullpen. We want to go to the World Series.
But not everyone is so thrilled, and here's why. Moving to the Yankees wasn't the only news Chapman made this offseason.
More than a dozen police officers were called to Chapman's home in response to a domestic disturbance where he admitted to shooting his gun multiple times in the garage.
There's more. According to the police report, Chapman choked his girlfriend and pushed her against a wall. And after the news first broke, other teams in the market for a closer were spooked by the controversy. But not the Yankees. They sensed a bargain was in the offing and acquired Chapman for a few modest prospects. And last month, the Broward County, Florida State Attorney's Office announced no charges would be filed against the All-Star. But that's not the end of the story. Major League Baseball has a new domestic violence policy, and the Chapman incident will be its most high-profile test case. Brian Pacheco is the director of public relations for Safe Horizon, the largest victim services nonprofit in the United States. He comes from a family of Yankees fans, but as for Pacheco, he's more a fan of the new policy.
Because it shows that they're taking allegations of domestic violence seriously, and based on what they find, they will act appropriately.
Safe Horizon released a statement following Chapman's trade to the Yankees, praising the MLB's investigation.
I think it's just important to take all allegations seriously and to give them their due diligence. And it's also important to know just because you don't press charges doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
Because of the allegations, a dark cloud now hangs over the start of the season for some fans, like this city employee who didn't want to give her name because of her professional requirement to remain neutral.
Obviously, these men are supposed to be in position as role models. They're paid millions and millions of dollars, and I don't think it really matters if they're an athlete or not. They should still be held accountable.
But for others, no legal charges means no judgment. Like Sean Clark, a bartender at Yankee Tavern, a bar around the corner from the famous Bronx Stadium.
If he did what he had to do, he deserves his suspension. But you know what? Until he's proven guilty, I would say that we shouldn't pass judgment on him right now.
And for Victor Bryant, without a legal conviction, there's just one factor that will keep him from cheering on Chapman when he takes the mound.
The only thing that will change my opinion about him, if he sucks as a player, the rascal should be kicked out of the Bronx. But if he steps up and plays and he delivers, that's all that matters.
Spring training begins today for the Yankees, but a formal suspension from the MLB may still be in store for Chapman, who's vowed to fight any potential ruling from the league. And the question remains, will the new star closer be donning pinstripes come opening day on April 4th? Elizabeth Brockway, Columbia Radio News.
Nearly 3 years ago, 4-year-old Ariel Russo was walking to school with her grandmother when Franklin Reyes, an unlicensed 17-year-old, hit them with an SUV. Russo's grandmother survived, but the little girl died. Today, Reyes was finally sentenced. Shandukani Mulaudzi has the story.
Ariel Russo was waiting at a traffic light on 97th and Amsterdam with her grandmother when a driver who was speeding away from police hit them, killing the little girl. Franklin Reyes Jr., who was 17 at the time, was driving his parents' car without a license. Ariel Russo's mother, Sophia Russo, says even though Reyes apologized in court today, she's not buying it.
Do I think that his apology was sincere? It was, honestly, too little too late. I mean, I'll really know he's sorry with his actions.
Russo says the sentencing provides her with a little bit of relief.
We can start to heal something that hasn't been able to even begin to heal because we've had to keep coming to court.
Although Reyes pleaded last year, his sentencing was delayed. Reyes was involved in another criminal issue after he dragged a policeman for 100 feet. Councilman Idanis Rodriguez is the chair of the Transportation Committee. He says this harsh sentence emphasizes the importance of Mayor Bill de Blasio's safe driving plan, Vision Zero, a new ad campaign that will be in English, Mandarin, Cantonese, and Spanish will air on TV and radio soon.
And today, together with the DOT commissioner, we announced a $2.5 million on educational awareness.
Sophia Russo is a founding member of Families for Safe Streets. She and other parents are committed to keeping New York streets safe too.
That's really my mission, is so that this won't happen again.
Reyes could be eligible for parole next August, but Sophia Russo says she will keep reminding the parole board of all that she has lost. Shandukani Mulaudzi, Columbia Radio News.
In 2014, Atla Church in Harlem began posting words on its marquee like, "All churches that support homos, cursed be thou with cancer," and "Harlem is a sodomite-free zone." And Atla's pastor, James David Manning, has been preaching those words for years.
The church is about $1 million behind in its bills, and next week it is to be up for foreclosure auction, which Atlas says their nonprofit status prohibits. The Ali Forney Center for Homeless LGBT Youth started a crowdfunding campaign to buy the church and has already reached its goal.
But that's not the only group trying to reclaim that space for LGBT people. Aaron Galaxon spent some time with an inclusive church called Rivers of Living Water that's also trying to buy Atla.
Like a lot of LGBT and gender nonconforming Christians, Sasha Washington has had some bad experiences in church.
I was told that I was a mistake and I'm embarrassing God. A pastor in the Bronx told me this. And I ran out of church and turned my back on God for years.
The 29-year-old from Brooklyn has been hurt by church, and for years she wasn't ready to go back. But leaders from Rivers of Living Water reached out to her, and they were persistent.
Pastor Brown and Mother Tawan, years when I was homeless, being a bad girl in the village, and they used to come out, I'm gonna get emotional. They used to come out with sandwiches and pull me to the pier and sit down and just talk to me. And
Vanessa Brown is the senior pastor at Rivers of Living Water, a congregation made of mostly African American and LGBT Christians. She is one of the leaders who helped Washington find God again. Brown says many in her congregation have been hurt by fellow Christians who cite scripture to say homosexuality and gender nonconformity is sin.
People need this ministry. When people have problems with theological abuse, when they have problems with emotional and mental abuse, this is the place where people come.
At Rivers, Sasha Washington found stability and a family.
They pull me to the side and give me that tough family, genuine love. Not the shady love, but the genuine love.
But Brown says Rivers of Living Water has been looking for stability too, for 9 years.
I mean, we've been moving around like the children of Israel, quite frankly.
Because many of its congregants are low income, Rivers hasn't been able to afford its own space in Upper Manhattan. Instead, it has to turn to other churches to share, And those churches don't always have open doors for a church like Rivers, especially when they learn it's a largely LGBT congregation. Justin Lee is the executive director of Gay Christian Network, which he founded to support LGBT Christians. He said that while a lot of American society have become more accepting of LGBT people,
a lot of Christian churches have not only lagged behind, but become more vocally opposed. Many of these folks really don't understand a lot about LGBT people, and they are very concerned about getting doctrine wrong.
even where Rivers does find a place to rent, space is tight for the congregation of about 200. On Wednesday night, members met in a dark rehearsal space upstairs at United Methodist Church on 86th Street.
So God is faithful. I know that God is.
They're praying for a space of their own and for their fundraising campaign to buy Atla Church.
8 more days, and we've got about $25,000 or $26,000 so far. We have to have a way to at least have $200,000 to walk into that auction. And then we'll have 30 days to get the balance.
The $1.02 million owed on the building.
I have people tell me to my face that you cannot do this.
It's a long shot, but Brown says Rivers of Living Water is going to try at Wednesday's auction, which Atla's pastor claimed on Wednesday may have been postponed.
And I do understand, that God will probably do whatever God is going to do, but I do want to exercise my right to pray.
With thousands left to raise, Rivers of Living Water likely won't win an auction for Atla's building. But with the new $25,000 they have now, they're closer than ever to reaching the promised land, a church to call their own. Erin Galaxon, Columbia Radio News.
Harper Lee, the author of the seminal American novel To Kill a Mockingbird, died today at 89. Her groundbreaking examination of race in the Deep South was a finalist for the National Book Award in 1961 and won the Pulitzer Prize that same year. I spoke to Lisa Lucas, the incoming executive director of the National Book Foundation, about Lee and her lasting influence on American literature. She says she can't remember exactly when she first came across To Kill a Mockingbird.
I'm pretty sure that I encountered the book in high school, maybe middle school. It just feels like one of those books that's just been part of our collective consciousness. So that while it feels like a meaningful reading experience that I had and something that I really cherish and think about a lot, I couldn't really tell you when I came across it.
Do you feel now, with your experience and your career built on books and literature, that it has more symbolic meaning to you?
Absolutely. The book is filled with ideas and really encourage us to think about who we are, our morality, the complexity of life, to think about what it means to be a tomboy. All of these things are important. But I think overall, it's such a hugely important book because it engaged so many people. It's kind of like the chocolate-covered pill of literature in a lot of ways. It's a big, important, thoughtful, heady book that really looks at American life in a really important way, especially when it was published in 1960. But I think it really does the work of bringing people in this really palatable way where everybody feels like they have a relationship to it. They feel like they understand the characters. I think that it's just this really accessible book in a way that's exciting because it makes people want to read.
So you talked a lot about the chocolate and the chocolate-covered pill, but can you talk a little bit more about kind of the medicinal part of To Kill a Mockingbird? Like, why was it an important pill for us to swallow collectively in 1961?
I think on one level, I think you just have this incredible artifact of what Southern life looked like at that time, right? And the book works on a lot of different levels, we think about it in terms of race relations in the South, we think about it in terms of childhood, we think about it in terms of gender roles, right? So it does all of these different things. I think that, looking at it now, I think that it's an incredible piece of a, ever-growing body of work that explores race in America. That's for me, I think probably the most important kind of medicinal purpose of the book is that, we have to look at, the country that we live in and how we all relate to one another. And I think that while it's enjoying and exciting and everybody loves Atticus Finch and Scout is amazing and, there's all these characters that are just unforgettable, we're also learning a hell of a lot about what's actually happening in 1960s, late 50s America. And how race is understood in the South. And I think that, an important thing to look at, and it's presented in a way that people in the U.S. were actually able to take a look.
Great. Well, any final thoughts?
No, I mean, I just think it's a heartbreaking loss. Harper Lee's an icon, really, and it's interesting to see somebody who's a quiet, media-averse writer who, produced this, masterwork, this thing that, will never be forgotten and that so many people have read and been moved by and have learned from. And, she just really, her contribution to, American letters is tremendous, and it's just, it's a sad loss for all of us, and it's also a happy thing that we have her work to keep reading, and for many years to come we will keep on. So that's it.
Well, Lisa Lucas, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Congratulations on your new incoming position as Executive Director of the National Book Foundation, and thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
New York City Beer Week starts tonight. Henriette Shakar found out what's brewing in the city's beer industry.
IPAs may have gone MIA during Prohibition, but after President Jimmy Carter legalized home brewing in 1978, production started to sizzle. I spoke with a different Jimmy Carboni, owner of Jimmy's No. 43 Craft Beer and Kitchen, about the changes in the New York City beer scene. Carboni believes that cheaper real estate in the city, following the financial crisis in 2008, inspired even more breweries to open up.
Brewers were talking about opening breweries outside of New York City because they thought New York City was too expensive. And instead, that was like the domino effect, I really think.
Back in 2005, there were only 4 breweries in the city. Now, there are over 20, with around 60,000 barrels produced a year. There's a brewery in every borough. Queens and Brooklyn are in the lead, while Manhattan, with only one, is falling behind. But New York City's Beer Week is still going strong in its 8th year. It kicks off tonight in over 100 restaurants and bars. Cheers to that! Henriette Shakar, Columbia Radio News.
While much of Europe is struggling with the current Syrian refugee crisis, Calais, a city in northern France, has been dealing with a migrant population since the late 1990s. Now, a group of civic-minded technology and design people are using this community as a way to try out some ideas of how to make lives for refugees a little safer. Adele Mbert reports.
Calais, France is one of the last stops if you want to hitch a ride to the UK. More than 6,000 refugees now live in this city, within the city. The camp in France is known as the jungle. One of the biggest problems, especially in the winter, is how to provide safe housing.
We can spread our arms out very wide in it.
Jabin Ali is talking about a new type of temporary housing she has developed for the refugees in Calais.
It's 3 meters in length and 2 meters in width, and in height it's 2 meters. And the one great thing is the bamboo rods also serve as an opening door. So you can also open it and lock it with the thumb press locks.
This type of fully functioning shelter has been a great challenge for the young architect. She says the way people have repurposed shipping containers and tarps to build shelters inspired her. Her design uses bamboo and PVC plastic inflatable building blocks, think Lego blocks, that can become a house or even other structures.
And the same way that you've built this, you can even build very creative ways, for example, playgrounds for children. And you can create it into a mattress by laying the base on the ground. 2 of them is 2 meters long. You can lay there much more comfortably than the tarp option.
Ali is part of a community of designers and technologists here in New York City. They call themselves tech refugees. Last week in New York, these engineers, architects, and designers met for a conference. Their goal, to rethink humanitarian action and create services to help refugees. Ryan Sommer is one of the organizers of the Tech Refugees. About 60 projects have come out from the community so far.
Things like projects for travel and mapping, projects that help people find families and people, loved ones, once they're in safe areas, helping to connect with donations, and there's even been an Airbnb for refugees.
Some of the problems of the migrants can be helped with technology, but J.C. Kanan says there are limits. He teaches architecture at Columbia. He says it is crucial for humanitarian architects and urban planners to engage the people on the ground.
If we rely on technology to solve this equation, we will be overlooking the qualitative aspects of place, of people, of community, and technology is not going to recreate an identity of people.
Jabinali says she knows the limits of technology, but she wants to do her small part to help with the bigger problem.
We'll hope that this is truly a tool that we want them, that will benefit them the most.
Right now, she's financing the project herself, and she has launched a crowdfunding website. It could be in Calais as early as next summer. Adèle Lambert, Columbia Radio News.
Feminism is a difficult word to define these days. Increased visibility for trans women has added a new dimension to this often fraught conversation. One artist is using her work to explore precisely this tension. Jakai Johnson reports.
A new exhibit opened last night of paintings at the Andrew Krebs Gallery on West 22nd Street in Chelsea. LA-based artist Andrea Bowers has a new exhibit that focuses on feminism from the eyes of a trans woman. It's called Whose Feminism Is It Anyway?
Well, all of my work is about documenting activists and using my artwork to create an archive of political activists of our time who I think are doing really amazing work.
The 10 paintings in the gallery show trans women in different poses with weapons. One has a gun and one has a hammer.
Every time a trans woman is murdered, because, they're killed for just being who they are. They are, the most at-risk community in the United States.
She says she wanted to portray trans women as powerful. It was important to show them as ready to fight.
They're all political activists. They're all really amazing activists who do really strong nonviolent civil disobedience protests.
Bower student Andy Tinnell helped to develop the exhibit. She's a trans woman who hopes that traditional feminists will embrace trans women.
In an ideal world, of course, we wouldn't need trans feminism and we wouldn't need intersectional feminism. It would just be feminism.
Tinnell wants people to know that trans women and feminists have more in common than you think. They share a similar interest in the organization Planned Parenthood.
Like a group like Planned Parenthood, they're not well known for this, but they provide some of the most services for trans women in the country.
The exhibit will be open until the end of March. Bowie said that she will continue to work on this theme.
Trying for the rest of my life to create representations of women in action and to show their intelligence, their actions, their politics, their beliefs.
Bowie says that beauty belongs to all women, those born as a woman and those who become a woman. Jakai Johnson, Columbia Radio News.
We all remember when our parents went through their midlife crisis. That period from their 40s to their 60s where they did weird things in hopes of finding eternal youth. Commentator Gilda DeCarli says she's found it, and it's no elixir.
I realized the other day, I'm 24 and a half, and so as I approach my quarter-life crisis, I'm looking ahead to my midlife crisis. I figure maybe there's a way I can reverse engineer my way out of the impending doom, the doom of getting older. So I'm taking some notes from my parents' notebook, who are in their late 50s and I can safely say are still figuring it out. My dad, a respected cardiologist who teaches at Harvard, decided last year to embrace his baldness and shave his head, grow a goatee, and buy square-rimmed glasses. He looks a bit like Walter White, the lead character in Breaking Bad. He's even retreated to working in the basement after work, but I think he's trying something on. It wasn't just that. He also turned in the family-friendly Subaru for a forest green Mini Cooper. He's got an Apple Watch on one wrist and a Fitbit on the other. Basically, he's gone from my dorky dad to kind of a hipster, middle-aged style. And my mom, a neuropharmacologist by training, has gone back to school after taking a couple decades off to raise me and my sister. At 57, she clicked on a banner ad on the internet, one that read, "Are you a struggling artist?" I guess she figured, why not? Now she's getting a degree in studio art. That means I'm now helping her translate youth culture. We've covered the basics, like how to cut class, why her 18-year-old classmates smoke a joint during class breaks, and whether it's worth figuring out if her classmates were born she's or he's, a predicament made all the more difficult with gender-neutral bathrooms. So even though we're close, from my perspective, my parents' midlife crises look like a second shot at teenagerhood. It's a little confusing for my 16-year-old sister, but she'll be fine. She's marked her territory with her coded language and choreographed dance videos on Instagram, things my parents might never understand. But for me, at this point in my life, I'm impressed. They seem to be willing to take risks. They're good navigators for me. Not so much on eternal youth, but more so on growing up, because I've noticed they're not done yet. They're not afraid of being beginners again, though. Sometimes I feel like the roles are reversed. I'm freaking out about getting a real job, and they're all jokes nonstop. So I guess I've come to the conclusion. Don't hold back. Start the crisis now. I'm dating a stand-up comedian, I'm giving Bikram yoga a try, and I vowed to never take my life seriously. We're always fretting about getting older, but in fact, we're always just growing up.
Gilda DiCarli is doing Bikram yoga right now. Well, that does it for this edition of Uptown Radio. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Our executive producer today was Adrian Ma. Leading our staff of reporters were senior producers Nina Agrawal and Oliver Arnaldi.
Director Gilda DiCarli coordinated our studio production with Aaron Galaxon and Stephen Basaha.
Our web team, Daniel Rostas and Jakai Johnson, got this stream live to the web. Tyler Pratt produced the news. Katie Ferguson and assistant editor Adele Lumbert led our copy team.
Our instructors, Carrie Donahue, Danielle Aracon, Sally Herships, and Matt Collette advised our staff. I'm Jeffy Bernard.
And I'm Isabella Kulkarni. Uptown Radio is live on Fridays at 4. Until next time, you can always find us on uptownradio.org. From all of us here at Uptown Radio, thanks for listening.